Throughout history, there have been literally countless murder cases that shook the world. A criminal murder case must contain a few key elements to truly disturb the nation and attract media attention. For one, the case must be heinous. The public generally responds to a case that involves a horrible crime scene or a victim that is seen as innocent. Second, the case must include a cloud of mystery. Viewers get hooked on learning more and more shocking details as the case is solved. Third, it must be convincing. Viewers will obviously still be intrigued by cases with various possible endings. However, if a suspect is seen as clearly guilty by the audience, it will attract more attention because viewers want to see justice served. Considering these few facts, some cases have not only gained popularity during their investigation or trials, but they've made a lasting mark on media and public viewers. These are some of the worst or most mysterious cases in history. Number 5. This case began in 1932. Not only has it secured a place among history's most shocking crimes, but it still receives attention today from curious readers and amateur investigators that create their own theories surrounding the final facts of the case. Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was a 20-month-old son of famous aviator Charles Lindbergh. On March 1, 1932, at around 7:30 p.m., the Lindbergh family nurse, Betty Gow, put baby Lindbergh to sleep in his crib. 2 hours later, Charles heard a strange sound coming from the baby's room. However, he disregarded the sound and assumed that it was something in the kitchen. At about 10 p.m., Nurse Gow returned to check on the baby and was shocked to discover that he was gone. Before making a scene, she checked the baby's mother, who'd just taken a bath. He wasn't with her either, though. Nurse Gow alerted Charles, who inspected the nursery. He found that a window was broken and a poorly written note had been left behind. The note, which was almost impossible to read due to horrible grammar and spelling, explained that the baby had been taken and a $50,000 ransom was required for his safe return. Charles took his gun and searched the grounds. He found footprints, bits of broken window, and his baby's blanket. He immediately contacted police and his attorney. Authorities arrived to the home shortly thereafter, and officers searched the grounds tirelessly but found nothing of importance. Specialists were even unable to find fingerprints that were left behind. Within a few hours, more people showed up to search. Many members of the search party were important businessmen, scientists, politicians, and prominent public figures, all friends of Charles. The days after the kidnapping, then President Herbert Hoover was notified. Kidnappings were considered a state crime. Hoover announced that the entire Department of Justice would be assigned to find baby Lindbergh, though. Due to the celebrity status of many of the searchers present, the media quickly became involved. News articles and radio broadcasts covering the story were published in bulk, and the case eventually became a spectacle for the public. While the conditions of the kidnapping may not be as shocking today, at the time this case was disturbing, upsetting, and concerning. It was one of the worst cases to occur around that time. A third ransom note was eventually received, and it required a higher payment of $70,000. It also instructed that John Condon, a retired teacher and public personality, be the man between the family and the kidnappers. It's also instructed how the money should be delivered. John agreed to play his part and met with a mysterious man to deliver the ransom. He was unable to get a good physical description of the man, but explained that he described him as a Scandinavian sailor. He also claimed that the baby was being held safely on a boat and would not be harmed unless the family stopped cooperating. A few days later, another ransom note and the baby's sleeping suit was mailed to John. On April 2nd, an unknown cab driver gave John Condon another note. John followed its instructions and delivered ransom to the suspects. He informed them that he was able to raise $50,000, and the suspects, who hid their appearance, accepted the money and told John the baby was being cared for by two innocent women. However, the infant's return never occurred. The nation stayed up to date with every article the media published. By this time, the case had sparked a frenzy and citizens had become consumed by any news concerning the infant's safe return. Unfortunately, the remains of the infant were found about a month later. A truck driver had pulled over to relieve himself in a wooded area a few towns away. He noticed the body of an infant and contacted authorities. The body's skull had been badly fractured, and decomposition had attracted nearby woodland animals who chewed on the flesh. It was concluded that the infant had died from a fatal hit to the head, and its burial was a hasty job. Nurse Gow confirmed the identity of the toddler, and the family was notified. The family was devastated, and the public shared their grief. The media coverage did not stop here, though. Throughout the following investigation, the case still captivated the nation as they yearned for the case to be solved and for justice to be served. In 1934, Richard Hoffman was arrested for the crime. After a month-long trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. Finally, the family was given answers they wanted and got to see justice rain down on their child's killer. The public was still obsessed with this case and found their own sense of relief when media outlets announced the suspect's sentence. This case was not only shocking because of the public figures involved, but also because of the intense media coverage and the conditions of the kidnapping and eventual murder, which were uncommon during this period. The case disturbed the nation and suggested that times were changing. Number 4. This case is from 1957 and is actually considered a cold case in some aspect. It's often referred to as the case of the boy in the box, and is without a doubt one of the most mysterious, shocking, and notorious cases of all time. This case is about a 4 or 5-year-old boy who was found dead inside of a wooden box in a forest area of Fox Chase, Philadelphia in February of 1957. Right from the start, this case becomes strange and confusing. Usually, when a child's remains are found, they can be linked to an existing missing persons case. For this poor child, though, he was never reported missing. On February 25th, 1957, a young man was checking his muskrat traps in a forest when he stumbled upon a mysterious box. Upon opening the box, he was shocked to see the body of a child. He feared that officers would confiscate his traps, so he didn't report what he had found. A few days later, a college student was passing the area and saw a rabbit run into the underbrush. Worried the rabbit would be caught by the trap, he got out of his car to help. He noticed the box and checked its contents. While he thankfully reported what he'd found to police, he was reluctant to be any further involved and would not provide a statement. The box which held the boy was a large bassinet box from JCPenney. The boy was wrapped in a plaid blanket and set carefully inside. His hair had been recently cut and remaining clumps of hair were stuck to his face. A study of the body showed signs of malnourishment, surgical scars near an ankle, groin, and under the chin. After obtaining the body, police collected fingerprints and created a sketch of the boy. They were initially optimistic that he would soon be identified, but unfortunately, a quick check showed that no child resembling this boy had ever been reported missing. Furthermore, after making the sketch public and calling for any relatives of the victim to come forward, another dead end was hit. No one claimed the child, and he remained unidentified. The case immediately drew the attention of the media and the public, and news outlets published countless stories about the boy. The Philadelphia Inquirer published 400,000 flyers depicting the boy's appearance and spread them far and wide. Every day, updates were shared with the public about the anonymous boy, and soon not only was the media obsessed with the case, but their audience was consumed as well. The crime scene was inspected at least 270 times, and a white handkerchief believed to belong to the killer was found. It had a letter G sewn into it, and while this evidence was considered a breakthrough, it never actually led anywhere. After a while, officers positioned the corpse upright as though the boy was sitting, and they dressed him in new clothes and fixed his hair. They then took a photo and released it to the public, begging for anyone with information to call in. The photo sparked much controversy, and while most people were interested in the case and desperately wanted to see it solved, very few were okay with the idea of publishing a corpse's photo. It was described as too graphic and unethical. The photo sparked a wide dispute and unfortunately didn't help bring in any more evidence. The boy was never identified and the case eventually went cold. Even to this day, the innocent little boy has not been properly identified, and due to this, his killer has also never been found. When the case was still active, it was considered shocking simply due to the conditions in which the boy was found. Obviously, another intriguing factor is the lack of identification. It was baffling to most people that a child could be forgotten. He'd come from somewhere and someone had to know him, yet they left him behind. This saddened people, but it also motivated them. People began conducting their own investigations to concoct theories concerning the boy's background. Remington Bristow, an employee of a medical examiner's office, dedicated his free time to pursuing the case in the early 1960s. An anonymous psychic contacted Bristow and told him to look for a house that matched the foster home. The psychic was brought in from New Jersey and led Bristow to a foster home. Bristow later attended an estate sale at the foster home, and while there, he noticed a bassinet that matched the style of the box that was originally held. He also noticed an array of plaid blankets hanging out to dry that matched the blanket the boy was wrapped in. After learning more about the family that ran the home, Bristow believed that the child belonged to the stepdaughter of a man who owned the home. He believed that an accident occurred and the owner wrapped up and disposed of the body so that his stepdaughter would not be exposed as an unwed mother of a dead child. Bristow reported his findings to the authorities, and evidence was completely circumstantial though, so officers were unable to make an arrest. Bristow continued working on the case until the day that he died, and the case still haunts those that stumble across it. In fact, some amateur investigators still request information on the cold case to try their best to find the victim. What makes this case such a historically shocking one is the fact that the public not only paid attention to the case, but they devoted their own time to it because they were so deeply disturbed by it. Number 3. The case of Kurt Cobain's death provides many of the key elements that make a case historically shocking. Cobain was the frontman of the grunge band Nirvana. The band's music quickly took off and was considered famous in no time. Cobain is considered one of the most iconic musicians in history, and Nirvana's hit song Smells Like Teen Spirit was recently named the most iconic song ever in early 2019. So it's no surprise when Cobain suddenly died and the public was shaken. On March 1st, 1994, Cobain was staying in Germany because of the band's tour. Unfortunately, he fell ill and was diagnosed with bronchitis. His wife, Courtney Love, traveled with him to Rome to receive medical treatment. That night, the pair checked into a hotel so that he could rest, and the next morning, Love woke up to find Cobain had overdosed on prescription medication. They rushed him to a hospital, and after 5 days in treatment, he was released. Love initially believed that the overdose was an accident, but later shared that it was Cobain's first suicide attempt. On March 18th of that same year, Love called 911 and claimed that Cobain was expressing suicidal thoughts while locked in a bathroom with medication. Officers arrived and Cobain surrendered the pills, stating that he was not suicidal and was just trying to hide away from Love after an argument. An intervention was later planned by Love, and Cobain became violent with his friends and family at first, but he reluctantly agreed to attend a detox program. At that time, Cobain was allegedly addicted to heroin and pills. While in rehab, visitors claimed that Cobain seemed to be getting better and was more positive. After visiting with family one day, Cobain later stepped out of the hospital to have a cigarette. He then jumped a fence and fled from the scene. He was allegedly spotted on several occasions, but his loved ones had difficulty locating him. On April 8th, electrician Gary Smith arrived at Cobain's Washington Boulevard home and found the singer dead. Smith called the authorities and reported that aside from a small amount of blood, Cobain seemed fine. In fact, Smith did not recognize that he was dead until he tried to wake him up and noticed a shotgun near his ear. An autopsy found that Cobain had actually died 3 days before he was discovered. Heroin and painkillers were found in his system, but the amount was not lethal. It was publicly announced that Cobain had been found dead at the age of 27, allegedly from suicide. The loss of Nirvana's frontman shook fans across the world, and thousands attended a vigil to mourn his loss. Aside from the shocked reaction of fans, which was expected, there was a lot of surprising amount of disbelief. Cobain left behind a lengthy suicide letter that was eventually shared with the public. The sad letter exposed that Cobain had been suffering from severe depression and drug addiction, something many of his close associates already knew. However, some fans used the letter as evidence against this existing verdict. Apparently, some sections of the letter contained handwriting that was noticeably different from Cobain's usual style. Additionally, some quotes within the letter didn't match the writing voice that Cobain had displayed. These individuals took the evidence as proof that Cobain was murdered. An investigation performed on Cobain's body also suggested that the gun was too long for Cobain to have pulled the trigger. The evidence showed that the length of the gun made it difficult for Cobain to reach this trigger on his own. This spurred the theory that Cobain was incoherent from his drug use, and his murderer shot him and then positioned the scene to look like a suicide. Despite these theories, which believers were very passionate about, those in charge of the case stuck by their suicide verdict. The friends and relatives closest to Cobain also agreed that the verdict was true. For many years, theorists concocted their own simple investigations to determine the truth behind his death. In many instances, the suspected killer was believed to be Courtney Love. Cobain had described Love as obsessed with money, so naturally, theorists assumed that Love killed Cobain for his money after rumors spread that he wanted a divorce. However, at this time, Love was also a successful musician with her own impressive income. Other theories suggest that while Love may not have killed or planned to kill Cobain, she directly caused his suicide. Fans suggested that Love fueled problems with Cobain and made his addictions worse by constantly providing him the drugs. Some have even suggested that Love directly told Cobain to kill himself. Thanks to these theories, Love was hated by Cobain's fans and ridiculed so much that her career began to spiral downward. Even now in 2019, people still blame her for his death. Also, people are still constantly conducting their own investigations and spreading their own theories. Public figures, private investigators, journalists, YouTube content creators, and random fans of Nirvana are still publishing information about his possible murder. This death was shocking and upsetting to the public when it occurred, and it attracted immense media attention for several years. But again, what truly makes this case stand out is the ongoing effort the public has made to serve their own ideas of justice. Number 2. The bystander effect is a psychological theory that claims when bystanders witness a crime while other people are present, they'll likely not provide help. On the night of March 13, 1964, a 28-year-old woman was stabbed to death while a crowd of witnesses watched. An estimated 38 witnesses saw or heard the attack and offered no help. In fact, none of them even called the police. After leaving her job at a bar at about 2:30 a.m., Kitty drove to her apartment. While driving, she was seen by Winston Moseley. Kitty parked her car near the rear of her apartment building, and she was unaware at the time, but Moseley had been following her closely. After she got out of the car, Moseley quickly parked and pursued her on foot. He pulled out a hunting knife, which caused Kitty to run faster. She ran to the front of the building as her attacker followed. He eventually got a hold of her and stabbed her several times all over her body. Kitty screamed and exclaimed, "He stabbed me," and several witnesses heard the attack but casually disregarded it. One witness that was outside yelled, "Leave that girl alone," and Moseley ran from the scene. Witnesses watched as Kitty struggled to make her way to the rear entrance of her apartment building, and despite witnesses being present, no one went down to help her and no one called the cops. Witnesses later claimed that they saw Moseley drive away. However, he was actually searching the property to find Kitty. After Kitty made it to the rear entrance, barely alive, Moseley grabbed her again. He locked the door and proceeded to rape and rob her. He then left as Kitty slowly passed away. The witness reports in this case were very unusual. Investigators were unable to confirm which witness call occurred first. However, some callers provided statements. One witness apparently called the police long after Kitty had staggered to the back. Another witness said that he called two friends for advice. Those friends called a third person who finally called the cops. After extensive interviews with witnesses, officers estimated that among the 38 possible witnesses, at least half of them watched the crime from their homes and did nothing. It was difficult to grasp the idea that so many people could watch another person be attacked and offer no help whatsoever. After the case went public, outrage was expressed over these actions, and the case was considered a textbook example of the bystander effect. It's believed that the reason so many witnesses did nothing was because other witnesses were present. Witnesses may have subconsciously dismissed the attack because they assumed someone else would act upon it. Winston Moseley was later arrested for an unrelated crime and was charged with first-degree murder. He confessed to the crime, sharing details about his motive with prosecutors. He also confessed to murdering 2 other women prior to this. He was charged and sentenced to death, with 2 life sentences and an additional 15 years. Although the case was solved, he continues to attract attention to this day. The crime itself was disturbing, but the witness reports are considered the most shocking aspect of this case. Number 1. The case of the Grim Sleeper is a more recent crime that shocked the world involving a notorious serial killer that was finally brought to justice. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was responsible for at least 10 confirmed murders and 1 attempted murder in Los Angeles around 1988. The Grim Sleeper nickname derives from the fact that Franklin took a 14-year break from his crimes between 1988 and 2002. The killings began in 1985, with Franklin inviting a black female prostitute into his home before killing her with a .25 caliber shot. All of Franklin's victims were black females except for 1. Additionally, the majority of his victims were prostitutes. Franklin documented his crimes by first taking nude photos of the women, which he kept stored in his garage. It's unclear what caused the crime's hiatus, but after Franklin murdered Alice Alexander in September 1988, his next victim did not occur until March of 2002, when he killed Princess Bartholomew. In 2010, Franklin was finally arrested for his crimes, the most recent of which being Jenica Peters in 2007. He was charged with 10 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The trial stretched until 2016, and after many discoveries, deliberations, and recesses and delays, the Grim Sleeper was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. This case quickly unfolded as one of the most notorious serial killer cases in history. Furthermore, it was one of very few serial killer cases that gained significant media attention. A case such as this one had not been ongoing since the notorious cases prior to the early 2000s, which included familiar faces such as Bundy, Dahmer, and Aileen Wuornos, and others. Due to its rarity, Franklin and the Grim Sleeper case caused a media frenzy, with millions of citizens tuning into the news to stay updated. Individuals came forward as mature detectives who believed the killer had more victims than he would confess to. Others also expressed that they were a fan of Franklin and his macabre crimes, something that strangely occurs often for serial killers. Since its closing, the investigation and trial have been researched for a documentary and mentioned in at least 2 other popular true crime programs. An array of other popular references to the case have also been made in TV and film. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots.